Hello and welcome to the Buenos días, Oxnard podcast. Join us as we invite special guests to talk about topics that are important to everyone who lives, works, and does business in Oxnard.
Buenos días, Oxnard. This is Manuel Herrera, Manuel Herrera, Citizens for a Better Oxnard. Now, if you remember, last year, I believe it was in May, I interviewed the Assistant City Manager, Ashley Golden, and we discussed the budget. Well, a lot has happened since then, so fast forward to today, and here we are again with Ashley Golden, and we're going to be discussing the 2024-2025 budget. So, welcome, Ashley. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Always a pleasure. So, I know you've been busy, so I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today for this podcast. So, I guess we can just start right on it,
jump
right?
in, huh?
Let's just jump in. So, let's see here. Now, I wrote some questions like I always do.
Okay.
So, let's see. First question. We've had a multi-million-dollar budget deficit. And COVID and other major things happened in the past 5 years, right? So, can you walk us through some of the significant impacts that have affected the budget?
Sure. So we have a graphic. I'm sure you've seen it. We've used it for multiple years, and we'll use it again this year, just kind of building on to our story. But we call that the man in the hole. And that man in the hole does a great job of telling that story and telling the impact. So dating back about 5 years ago, actually 5 years ago, we had a $9.2 million structural deficit. And during that budget, the council had to make very difficult decisions. I talked about that last year during our interview as well, of one of the most difficult times as an employee here as well, as the council made a decision to have to lay off over 30 employees, shut vital programs, cut a lot of services, all services that our community deserves and needs. Very difficult time, but we've started to make progress, luckily, with the voters. They approved Measure E. We had that come in 3 years ago now, and with that we've been able to make restorations. The council adopted 5-year priorities, which have been a great roadmap for us to work with what the community said that they wanted. Those council priorities give that roadmap, and that's where we're recommending those improvements that are able to be made with the Measure E is coming from. But along the way, new challenges always arise. Obviously, the world was affected by the COVID pandemic, which luckily we had Measure E to kind of counterbalance some of that, but that happened during that time. We had a new lawsuit from Mr. Starr, a bonding lawsuit, which has been another not quite the man in the hole, but you'll see from the graphic, another delay and really impedes our progress. But we are making progress, and I think that's the important thing for the community to hear, and even for our employees to hear. Many of our employees are residents of this great city as well. We're making progress. We're getting out of the hole, but it is an incline. You think you kind of got there, right, and then you're like, oh no, here's another thing. I mean, actually, just today, Mr. Starr turned in ballot initiatives for the signatures. There'll be 3 initiatives affecting the CFD, the Community Facilities District up in River Park. So kind of feel like every turn you take, you're looking for another boulder, rain's coming down at you, going uphill. And then we're dealing with the other things the community all communities are dealing with. Inflation, still supply chain disruptions, tough labor market. It's gotten better, but it's still really tough. You'll see cities throughout California doing signing bonuses, just really hard to fill positions and things that we need. So it's stable, it's improving, but it's not an easy walk. You better be in shape if you're going to be walking in Oxnard here.
Yeah, there's always going to be obstacles, and I do remember the deficit because I made a very special appearance at the city council
That
meeting.
You did.
And, we should all not be afraid to voice our opinions, right? And that's what I did. But I know we have some great news, so that's a good thing. And at least we're going on the right direction.
We are.
Right? So, we've had quite a journey. So, what should the community take away about where Oxnard is today? Like, where have we made some progress?
I think one of the things that I want to just back up a little bit, and we touched on it last year, so I don't want to be that boring about it, but is understanding where our revenue comes from. We talked about income taxes, and none of that comes to the city. That you pay that, but that's not city money. But that's similar with property taxes and sales taxes as well, which are our main revenue source. So our property taxes, they're about 30% of our overall revenue, and our property taxes are strong, but not all of that money you pay on your property tax comes to us. Only about 17% of that money comes to the city of Oxnard. And same thing with sales tax. So the majority of our sales tax, which is at 9.25 now, I know we get some flack for that of how high it is, but I think you can see that we're putting that to good use in the community. But of that 9.25, the lion's share goes to the state. Over 4% goes to the state, or just around 4%. 3% comes back to Oxnard. And of that, Measure O is a portion of that. And I know we've talked about that for many years with inside City Hall, but for those of you that don't know, Measure O sunsets in 2029, and with that comes $20 million annually in today's dollars that we will not have. So it's really important that Measure E that we have coming in, because that is solely for Oxnard's use. So just kind of understanding how important that revenue source is for the city, I just want to kind of lay that context of what the takeaway should be is that's a vital lifeline for us to be able to provide services and restore services within the community. I think on top of that, there's also just the financial progress that we've made. We talked about that in our budget last year as well, about the 7 kind of pillars of financial stability. And within those financial stabilities, fund balance is one of them. And I know that's a very a term that probably not a lot of people would use, but that's kind of after you use everything for your normal operating expenses, paying payroll, buying equipment, buying materials, you have a fund balance. And the general rule is to have 2 months worth of expenses within that fund balance. And during our difficult times, we were down, so for us at 16%, we were down to 2.2% during those difficult years. So we didn't have a bank account, if you would, if there was an emergency or we needed to do something. We had no savings account to go into. We were down to 2.2%.
Wow.
$3 million-ish is all we had kind of in our bank account. And today, and this is something that Alex can talk about with you further, but we will be able to recommend that we increase that up to 16.6%, that we will be at that 2 months that you are recommended to have in your account. And that alone shows just huge progress. That shows stability within the city, and it shows that we're being responsible about how we're using those revenues that do come into the city to really provide a stable environment for our community.
So would you say that Measure E saved us?
I would say it did a little bit more than save, especially at a time when you're at a deficit, but I would say it's still not enough. I mean, you can see how many gaps we still have in services. We are not able to restore what has been previously taken away or even do what the community needs. We have drastically improved, but we also have to keep in mind Measure O ending, and that's, again, 20 million. So in a sense, it's filling that hole of planning for Measure O, but we utilize all the funds that come in right now, and we still have our staffing levels in PD are still lower than they were in 2015. Fire, if you look at us on a comparison department-wide of a city our size, they would need 75 more firefighters. We get a lot of flack about our building permit process sometimes. I mean, a lot of that's staffing. And the cost of all services have just gone up. I think we all feel that every day, and what you pay for gas, what you pay for groceries when you go out, what you pay when you eat out.
And the breakdown on that, like you were mentioning, is, see, the perception is that sales tax is 9.25% and the city of Oxnard gets all of it. And that's not the case.
Right.
And that's what a lot of people don't realize. We only
3%.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so and that's only part of the revenue, right? Then there's property tax, and even then we don't get
that's 17, just over 17%. I think
of 1%, right? Of
17.6% of the overall the money that comes in. The county schools get the majority of the property tax that comes in. One other unique thing to Oxnard right now that I haven't mentioned yet is the Amazon facility. I know we got some pushback about supporting that and taking that through the process as well, but I'd like to remind the community that provided 1,500 jobs, benefited jobs, which is an important part of raising the overall economy within our community. benefited, high-paying, not necessarily high-paying, good-paying jobs, stable income in your community. But another important thing on that, because it's located here, there is an income distribution or a sales tax distribution where it had a significant impact on our revenue. And right now there is a bill introduced, state legislation making it through that would highly impact that distribution as well on our revenue. But that has been one of the driving forces of that stability and being able to build back up our reserves. So a unique thing to Oxnard, few of them within California.
Yeah, no, I think that was a good thing to get Amazon here. Now, they were supposed to come here, and then they didn't, and then they did, right?
Yeah, correct. So, I mean, some stop-start on that, but, I mean, we didn't give them any breaks in terms of development fees. We didn't give them sales tax agreements. I mean, they had to go through the process to get there, and they built a very large facility that's employing a lot of people and really helping our sales tax numbers in the city.
Excellent. So you mentioned the 5-year priorities. So would you mind talking about a little bit more about what they are and how they were created?
Sure. So we kind of refer to them as our roadmap. We started to do community outreach back in 2019, kind of hear from the community, what do you want to see? You know, that was after we had already made budget cuts and the community was really feeling the impact of those. So we sought their input. We held a variety of community meetings, council committee meetings to refine those more. We did a community survey to again refine them further, kind of get down to what do they really want. We can't do everything. We had more public meetings, and the council ultimately adopted 5-year priorities. And within those 5-year priorities, which have now actually been extended to 7 due to many of the the bonding litigation, inflation, supply chain issues. So there's 7-year priorities, but within them there's 5 categories, and each of the categories have 5 priorities. So there's public safety, quality of life, infrastructure, organizational effectiveness, and economic development. And like I said, within each of those, there's 5, so a total of 25 priorities.
And I was taking notes, and I even printed the 5-year priorities and everything, and because again, the whole purpose of this podcast is to inform the people, let them know what's going on and everything, but it's also up to the public to inform themselves, right? So, and in the 5-year priorities, that had a lot to do with community input, right?
Correct.
As you were stating.
Right.
So they have a say in all this as well, right?
Yeah, many places to engage. I mean, clearly we can't do everything, so I don't think everyone feels that way that they had a say, but we heard and we took that input in, and ultimately things have to be refined because you can't have 100 priorities. That means you have no priorities.
Right, exactly. So there are 5 main categories within the priorities. So let's talk a little bit more about them. So I want you to go through each category in a bit more detail.
Okay. So our budget itself that will be presented will have a very detailed write-up on each of the 5, actually all 25 of the priorities that are there. So I'll highlight just a few here. So within public safety, and clearly paramount to every community. I mean, that is always important to have that. And we have, we do updates at City Council. So the fire department just did an update on that. And so they can go back and watch the March one to get a lot of detail. But clearly when you need fire, they're there. I mean, we had the huge Sunkist plant fire not very long ago. They do their job. They show up, they coordinate within that. I mean, it is amazing that we did not have loss of life, damage really to property in and around that space. Within the police department as well, I'll say they do annual updates to City Council as well, and there will be an article coming out related to crime stats. And within that, I mean, clearly problems have changed over time. So problems that we had 30 years ago are not the same problems that we have today, and overall the takeaway is crime is improving here. We're dealing with different problems. We're dealing with homelessness. We're dealing with fentanyl overdoses. We're dealing with guns, things that every community is dealing with, not unique to Oxnard. Unlike 30 years ago where we were dealing with gangs that were very specific to an Oxnard issue. Yes, LA, other big cities had them, but it was unique for Ventura County what we were dealing with. But within that priority, maintaining 911 was a huge priority. Their call volume continues to go up. For PD, it raised 2% this year. I mean, we're talking over 100,000 calls a year, and for fire, the calls continue to go up. And what's remarkable about that is our response time. We're able to respond to those incidents in less than 5 minutes, which is one of our goals. But for further detail, I would suggest really going back and watching the fire update as well as the PD update, and we can provide the links and directions to those. Within economic development, one of the other priorities, I'll just highlight two things within that priority. So one, the 4th Street renovation, and really what that is a project that council prioritized to connect the transit center to downtown to help that pedestrian connectivity, to make it safer. We've started the design phase for that, so that's at least underway. Really want to continue to concentrate on downtown and hopefully getting our first public project at least out of the ground. There's a lot of private development happening downtown. I mean, you can see not only the navigation center that's gone up downtown, but a lot of other private units that are coming in, so that's great. We need people to live downtown, and that 4th Street investment will really connect those people to public transit options and safe walkability in downtown. The other one within economic development, I think, is our Oxnard employee pipeline. That's a partnership that we have with Oxnard College. We've had some delays in getting it started. They did just announce their new president, so we're excited to get on board and start working with that president as well on this. But what we're trying to do is connect our residents to the training that they need to get jobs locally here in Oxnard. You know, bring up that education level and the skill level so they can have and work at great companies that we have in Oxnard. So we're hoping to get some more traction on that in July after he starts, but in the meantime we've continued to work with both the chamber and the staff that's at Oxnard College and making strides within that. Quality of life, I think, is one that's always near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. The quality of life priority really speaks to youth and senior programs. The Arts Academy is within that one as well, and I would say that we have had tremendous progress due to Measure E, and specifically because of Measure E. That's a place that always gets cut first.
Right.
And it's a place that our community needs more than ever. So Measure E restorations have been heavy into those departments. So within our youth programs, we've been able to increase hours at our Durley. Durley was completely shut down. We reopened the Durley Youth Center. We've been able to add hours to our Colonia basketball gym, so we've increased youth participation by 40% within those areas. We were also able to launch the outdoor camping event at College Park. A lot of our residents have never had the opportunity to camp, so we were able to work with a grant to set up an outdoor camping there locally, bring in the equipment, show them how to camp, have them do an overnight. We started a Halloween tour float. The Christmas float had been around for years, but we started that. And we started a mini mural program, which has brought a lot of color and excitement, at least to the parking structure downtown, and the Recreation Department and Arts Commission and community is continuing to find new places to install art. So that's been really exciting. With the seniors as well, we've been able to reopen the Colonia Senior Center and expand hours there as well, and increase participation for the seniors in the program. So the library, we're just getting off the ground. That's one of those things that we're starting to make investments, and we're recommending investments, but haven't really come quite to life yet. So we're working through some of those investments as well. I think the one that probably got the most attention was the infrastructure category, natural resources. That's for streets, medians,
Alleys.
trees, alleys. So maybe during one of your other previous budget, or not budget comments, but council dais comments, maybe you've hit us up on the roadways, but we had a lot of deferred maintenance when it came to streets. I mean, and we still do. And that bonding litigation impedes our ability to make a lot of progress there, but we are making progress. So prior to Measure E, we were at a 64 on our grade, if you will. So pavement condition index, it's out of a score of 100. 100 being the best, 1 being the worst. We were at a 64, and we've invested over $54 million since 2021 in streets and alleys. That's increased our score to a 67, short of council's priority of a 70, but that is primarily due to the bonding litigation. We cannot get bonds to invest at that level without cutting back in other areas. So it is progress. It's not the progress we want to see there, but it's progress. Trees, we used to only cut 2,000 trees, prune 2,000 trees a year. We're now doing well over 7,000 trees. mowing in parks. We were lucky if we were mowing once a month. We are now on a weekly mowing schedule within parks.
Right.
And we've been able to reinstate bathrooms. For a while they were just locked. Now we have a day, not only are they open, we have daily cleaning of bathrooms. So I know those all sound like very basic things and expected things from a community, and they should be, but we did not have the revenue to do that. And still, I think people want more than that. And again, they deserve that. We don't have the funds to do
Right.
more than that. But I think that's really good progress. The last one, and I know I'm answering and going pretty long here when I said go
No,
look at
that's
the
fine.
budget book, is organizational effectiveness. And I think that's one of those ones that the community goes, well, yeah, those are just expected. That's where we're talking about hiring people, training people, investing in cybersecurity and financial stability. I think those are expected of a governmental agency, or truly any group, to just do. They were not things that we were really investing in prior to Measure E. So we've been able to restore positions. That's one of the priorities with that. I talked a little bit already about the financial stability and where our general fund balance or bank account was before, down at a 2%. We've been able to raise that. Currently, we were at 13% in this current budget year, and we're going to recommend that they go up to 16%. That equates to about $30 million that we have in our rainy day fund, if you will. I mean, that sounds like a substantial amount of money, but it's money that's necessary to keep us going. We also were able to improve our credit rating. So similar to if you go get your FICO score and you want to be able, the better your credit rating is, the cheaper that money comes to you.
Right.
In just a 12-year period, our score went up five levels, or we had 5 credit changes. We still want to get better. We can't bond right now anyway, so I guess in the meantime we'll just keep working on all those financial principles to get us to a higher level. But again, just a lot of progress. And then finally, I'll just touch on the cybersecurity. IT has been underfunded for years, and since the passage of Measure E, we have made a lot of efforts of restoring funding to them and funding them at a level to protect, our brain, if you will, within the city. If our computer system gets hacked, everybody's information gets hacked. Your information gets hacked.
Wait, what?
I couldn't believe it. But yes, I mean, everything is in there. Every address is in there. Every permit is in there. Every utility bill is, everything is in there. And just people are getting smarter and more malicious about things like that. And so you really have to stay up. I mean, that's a place that a lot of corporations invest a lot of money in, and we weren't. But we are now. We're getting back on track and making huge strides within that organizational effectiveness priority.
Now, unless a person is blind, you can see a big difference in how Oxnard is looking compared to a few years ago.
Right.
Even right now on Gonzalez Road, they're doing, construction there all over the place, on the south side, on the north side, all over the place. So I remember a time when the city had no money and you're driving down Oxnard and all these weeds that were taller than me. I mean, I'm not that tall as it is, but still the weeds were really high. And, we call the city and they're like, hey, we'll get to them, but right now we don't have any money. So we've come a long way.
We have.
We've come a long way. So that's a great segue into our main topic, the city's next budget. So how are we looking?
We're looking good. I mean, I would still say, we'll go back to that graphic of the man in the hole. There's still clouds on the horizon, and not just in Oxnard, but in California. I mean, we're seeing kind of a flattening of the economy overall, less spending. Again, having a distribution center here, kind of makes us an anomaly where you will see headlines across California of budget reductions, layoffs, and those type of things. So I am incredibly grateful that we are nowhere close to that. We're just not restoring at the rate that we would like to, but we are stable. We have a positive budget. I like to be able to say that. We have a balanced budget. We are recommending increasing expenses by about 5%, $10, $11 million in terms of numbers there. So our revenues match that. They will be completely aligned. We're not overspending. Money we come in will come out, meaning $235 million is roughly the budget that we're looking at both expenses and revenues. But we do want to be cautious. There's a lot of uncertainty still, like I talked about before, that state legislation that's making it through that could really impact our revenue. So we want to continue to be pragmatic in what we look at and be not just respectful, be responsible with the taxpayers' money and reinvest it into the areas that they've clearly said are important to them. There's some other uncertainties out there. There's the Taxpayer Protection Act that's going to be on the ballot. We've referred to it as the Taxpayer Deception Act. It can completely unravel fees and how they come to the city and how you can get them approved. And so our council actually took a stance of opposition to that back in April at 2023. I'm sure there'll be a lot more push for this coming up, but it would affect development impact fees, which are the major way that you build infrastructure. It would affect service fees. Everything would have to go to the vote of the people, franchise fees. It would completely undermine all governmental agencies' abilities to bring in revenue sources to pay for actual impacts of development. So something definitely that we're keeping our eye on. There's other things obviously very unique to Oxnard that we're cautious about. I mean, what litigation may come next. I mean, and still working through the bonding litigation. I mean, that's very, very unique to Oxnard. That access is all other cities and governmental agencies have access to bonds, and that's something that the city of Oxnard doesn't. I think another thing that we were keeping in mind during the budget is utility cost increases. That's a major increase. I mean, it's over 30% increase for us for our just electricity alone, and for gas, luckily we don't use a lot of gas, but we've seen over a 500% increase since 2021. Doesn't equate to a lot in our general fund, but what you feel at home, we just feel on a greater scale for the city. But dealing with inflation and those utility costs, I mean, gas, we drive a lot of cars throughout the city to provide the services, all really cuts into that. So very balanced approach. 5% increase in both revenues and expenses specific to the general fund.
So it all trickles down, right? So it's kind of like when I go to the restaurant and the meal that I used to pay $10 for is now $14, and I asked the person, hey, why did this go up? Well, their costs went up.
Yeah.
Gets trickled down to the consumer, and it's no different with the city, right?
Correct.
So, and so I want to make sure I heard you correctly, because a few years ago we had a $9 million deficit, and now you're telling me we have a balanced budget? Did I hear that correctly?
You heard it correctly, and not only a balanced budget, but to end on a positive note on this question, maybe Alex will be able to reveal some more information about not just a positive budget, but just more progress in maintaining our financial stability and being responsible with the taxpayers' money.
Really? So Alex got some good news for us?
He's got some good news. I'll let him give you the good news, because normally he has to deliver bad news.
True. Okay, well, looking forward to that. So let's talk about bonding, because you mentioned bonding litigation. So how does the Aaron Star lawsuit affect next year's budget?
Well, similar to the current budget that we're in and the budget before, we're having to cash fund improvements that you would bond for. And why you would bond for them is because they're an investment and a reconstruction of something that lasts for multiple generations. So why make you pay for all of it right now instead of having that go over the life of the investments? Governmental agencies have access to bonds. Just here in Ventura County, between 2019 and 2023, they've acquired over $4 billion in bonds, just in Ventura County.
Yeah.
Oxnard has zero. New bonds. I mean, we have existing, but we can't bond. And that's just a normal
because of the Aaron Star lawsuit.
Yeah, so year after year, we are diverting money that we could be using for other programs.
And one thing in making my notes and everything, one note that I did was how some people out there, they refer to the bond issue as putting it on a credit card, right? But I think they do that in an effort to turn people off, on the concept, right? Or, they make it seem like it's irresponsible spending, and I think it's worth sharing that it's not putting it on a credit card. Anyone that uses the analogy either doesn't understand basic financing and budgeting, or they just don't think highly of the intelligence of the citizens of Oxnard. I mean, we all finance large items, cars, homes. We have to do this because we can't pay cash for everything. I mean, it's just doesn't work that way. And a lot of cities do bonding, right? I mean, that's how these cities work. But even though the city hasn't been able to do bonding, our credit rating, as you mentioned, is up. So that's a testament to how the city's doing. You know,
Correct.
even in spite of that, our rating is still very high.
Yeah, we're making progress in other areas. I mean, it's impacted what we can do today. It's impacted to work through some of the other council priorities, the fire stations, the senior center. I mean, that's been something that the community has asked for since probably about 2010. The aquatic center, seawalls that are necessary. I mean, a lot of large infrastructure projects. I know the streets are what's really visible, but there's a lot of other needs that we can't do. And if and when we win that bonding litigation, the expectation from the community is going to be do it now. Well, we also can't move that fast, and you can't afford to bond for everything at one time because that would be irresponsible. I mean,
Right,
that's like
exactly.
going and buying a $3 million house when you can only actually afford
Right.
a $500,000 house. So those things are going to be on a much different timetable now because of that. Everything gets pushed back, and as we know, when things get pushed back, they also get more expensive. Very rarely does the price of anything go down.
Right, exactly. And you know, I know people get tired of me saying this, but I get upset because it's like the city takes 2 steps forward, and then because of Star, they take a step back, and it's just unfair. Don't get me started on this guy. So anyways, so let's move along here. What are some important numbers that us community members should know about the budget?
So overall, just using actual numbers, I guess, to go with. So we'll be recommending a $235 million general fund budget. So both revenues and expenses. Again, like I said, we're going to have a balanced budget. So the money coming in is the money going out. So we'll be recommending that. That's about a 5% increase from where we were last year. Pretty restrained budget considering all the other costs that we have to just deal with, the inflation, the CPI. So a lot of that is just built-in costs that we can't say no to, state mandates, some other things like that. Also want to be cautious within those revenue projections like we talked about because of the uncertainty that we're facing, and also interest levels are very high. Well, that actually is a benefit in some cases for the city where we're seeing more interest income there. So being conservative, being restrained within that on our budget numbers for that. For Measure O specifically, that's pretty stable. We bring in about $21 million in revenue on Measure O. That's the one I talked about that will sunset in 2029. We use that to fund a lot of various projects that the community has asked for. A lot of what our capital improvement program, meaning improvements, physical improvements in the city, that's been a major funding source. We're projecting just over $22 million in expenses there. So more expenses than revenue there, but that's because we're planning for that sunset. We call it the weaning process. So we actually have a fund balance been built up there on purpose within that. I think that's pretty much on the numbers, but I could go into some of the specifics if you're interested on where those investments will really be made.
So obviously, as you mentioned, it doesn't sunset till 2029. That may seem like a long time from now, but it's not. It's right around the corner.
And that's a lot. I mean, $20 million in a $235 million budget, you got $20 million. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of services. That funds an entire more than an entire department for most cases in the city.
Wow. Now, what will community members see or experience based on this proposed budget in the year ahead?
So the things that you'll see, continued street paving. I mean, we're continuing to prioritize that despite having to cash fund it. I mean, we're starting to make progress, and if we stop, you start to go back on that score, which means you spend more money later. So it's a pretty delicate balance, but we can't do that forever. But we are still recommending around $20 million in investments to streets and alleys on the city. We'll continue to invest over $5 million for the trees and the mowing and the parkway. I mean, I think that we've gotten those to a good state, and we want to maintain that maintenance schedule so that we don't get ourselves in a different hole, not the man in the hole, but a different hole.
Right.
We're going to recommend some purchases and vehicle leases. It was another place that we had a lot of deferred, and our police department uses cars to do their jobs. Public Works uses cars to do their job, and we have not invested in those. So you'll see some purchases there that we can do them in, actually some specialized equipment like backhoes and bucket trucks and other things, so we can go out and respond and maintain things in a more timely fashion. So when a signal goes down, we have the equipment that we can go out there and do that instead of waiting for a contractor. So improving efficiencies with that. I mentioned the capital improvement program. We're recommending about $25 million in a capital improvement program. So that's things like the Colonia Boxing Gym. We are recommending that they fund. It's a place near and dear that has been just shut down for way too long, that community, it is a heartbeat within that community. And that's one of them. Ormond Beach, we're recommending some funding for that. The computer program, the ERP, the other one that we can't get the bonds on, we're still recommending funding that. We were well down the path on that when we lost access to those funds, so we're going to complete that. And roofs. So you saw when we walked in this building that one of the tiles looks like it might come down with water damage. Well, a lot of our facilities throughout the cities need roof replacements. So there's some roofing projects in there. So for people that use our facilities, I think they actually will notice those things.
Right.
A lot of our facilities are pretty run down. We are recommending some minimal staffing increases. We have built back up our staffing over time. I think we've consistently said people provide services, not equipment per se, so we will always need people to do those jobs. I know everyone thinks that, the chat is going to save everything, GP chat's going to save everything. It's not.
Right.
We're still going to need people. We're still going to need the technicians, so very modest increases in people. Actually only a net increase of 6 when we kind of move everything around, so not a lot for a city of this size. You'll see those improvements or those staffing come into the community development department as one of those, so really still trying to focus in on getting permits in a timely fashion to people. It's been a place that we've had hard to fill vacancies, if you will. It's not an industry that a lot of people are, not a lot of engineers out there, not a lot of planners out there anymore. I do want to say, I think what's equally as important as what you're not seeing here, you're not seeing a structural deficit, you're not seeing the layoffs, and you will be seeing those in a lot of other cities. There are a lot of headlines about that. I'm just very grateful as a city employee to the community for, again, passing Measure E and trusting us with that, because it makes this a much better place to work where you do have access to be able to give back to the community, and just really grateful we won't be seeing things like that.
Wow, great. And those are projects that the public will see.
Yeah.
So what are projects that the public won't see but are still important?
I think one that I'm really excited about that they won't see yet, but that they will eventually see, is the council's commitment to reinventing the library. We kicked off a conversation back in the fall about that, and we have hired a new library manager that's been with us a couple months, already making great improvements out there. And in this upcoming budget, we're recommending a few more staff positions over there, as well as programming for that and the Arts Academy. And so I don't think that's going to be anything too drastic quite yet, but really engaging in the community and starting to use the library the way our community wants to use it, rather than it being a place that you deposit a book and take a book out. There's just so many other great ways to use that, and our library managers being able to bring that vision and really working with the great staff that we already had there, but really getting them excited about that and starting to host other things. We have yoga in the library, and it's kind of like, well, why would you have it there? Why not?
Right. I haven't been to the library in years, but I was there recently.
Okay, good. Glad to hear it.
Because they had Shumash elder Julie Tuamite Stensley, and she gave a wonderful presentation there on the history of the Shumash.
Yeah.
So things like that, and like you say, yoga and all these different things. Times are changing, and the library has to change too, right? With their programming and everything else.
I think the other thing, and again, we talked about it a lot in last year's budget, are those 7 principles overall. And I can't stress enough how important those are to being a good, stable governmental agency for this community, of just being trusted. And we've made progress in all 7 of those principles. So our fund balance, that was one of them, where you want to be at a 16.6%. Well, like I said, we were at 2. We're going to be recommending that you go up to the 16% in this year's budget to the council, and that's just great that we're able to do that. Debt capacity, I guess this is one where I have to thank Mr. Aaron Starr. We can't issue new debt, so he's given us an A in that category.
There you go.
I'll find some positive with that. Budget flexibility, with those increased reserves that we do have a lot more flexibility within the budget to be able to make choices, and that's important for our council and for our community, because choices are important. Just because we're doing something now doesn't mean that we should always do that. And with having that fund balance, we have that flexibility. Our financial performance was one of the other ones. And in our 23 annual comprehensive financial report, it actually showed only a variance of 3.8%, and the goal is 10%. That's specific to the general fund, but that shows we're hitting our targets. If we're saying we're going to do something, we're doing it. And that's really important, to not have these big skews, and 1 year you're at 15, the next year you're at 2. It shows stability within that. So we've made a lot of progress there. Stable management. Our city manager's been here over 5 years now. Our city manager's office in general has been over 5 years. There was a time, and I think Alex did some presentations early on that kind of showed our leadership team and our directors of the turnover that we had. How many public works directors do we have? And there was so much turnover, and that has stabled out. And when you have that stability, you also can start something and hopefully finish it, rather than, we're going to do it this way this time. And within that stable management too, I think really listening to the community and getting the input on the priorities, we're making improvements the way that they wanted improvements in their life. And I think showing that commitment to that, the employee pipeline being an example of that, and then those other priorities. Cybersecurity, touched on that a little bit. That's one of those financial principles. We invested over $3 million in that last year's budget, and that's all in addition to the ERP system that we're doing, because that's not really cyber so much, but it does make us stronger. This year we're recommending another $5 million. So you can't see those things, but they are vital to protecting this community and our money and our projects. And the last one, financial reporting. I'm sure you were at some of those council meetings where we had over 100, audit findings, working through all that, and we had another clean opinion.
Yeah.
Those are good words to be able to say, and we actually just took an item to council last night, our financial corrective action plan. This is the second year in a row that we have no new findings and no repeat findings. So times they are changing, and they are changing for the better. A lot of that, again, is the revenue that came in, but a lot of it is the team and the trust from not only the community, but from the team that we have internally. So you don't get to see those things, but they are important, and it's exciting to be part of it. And I'm grateful, so grateful to have this job and be part of something like this for this community.
Good. And, it's amazing what you can do when you have money, right? Like,
Yes, yes.
It's... I literally watch every single city council meeting, right? And thank goodness for
Being able to call in.
being able to call in. I don't have to get all dressed up and drive over there anymore. I can call you guys from my house. And but some people said, "Hey, I don't see you complaining that much anymore, Manuel." And I'm like, "Well, because there's not that much to complain anymore." I mean, really, things are going good, and I love driving around, and I see the roads getting done, the alleys getting done. I mean, but because it takes money. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't do much. You can't do anything without money,
Yeah.
But I also want the people to get involved. That's always been my key. That's why I created Citizens for Better Oxnard. A matter of fact, I always say the best citizen is an informed citizen, right? So what's the best way for a community member to get involved in the budget process?
Well, clearly watch this. This is
sure.
a good primer for them. I mean, I know the budget is dry. It's a super voluminous document.
Right.
I mean, it's a special soul that wants to take the time to dive into all of that. But
Correct.
I do think this is a good way to kind of hear the high level of it. I think a very, very simple thing is reading the city manager's budget message and actually reading past ones and kind of see the difference of where we are. And that's normally a 2 to 3 page intro to the budget. We're launching a website this year of the budget book, so you'll be able to navigate through there. People can then have more access to it and be able to search that way. Clearly, there's the traditional ways of our council committee meetings and then our council meetings themselves.
Right.
We will have a meeting on May 14th as our first council committee meeting for the budget, and then one on June 4th and June 18th. So those are public meetings. The materials for those get printed ahead of time so you can read them, you can ask questions. Obviously reach out to your council members with questions. Staff is also available to answer questions. So the easy approach, watch us, read the budget message, and then participate in those meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who don't like numbers and find budgeting boring, I mean, you still need to inform yourself, because you can't complain if you don't know the facts. If you don't know what you're talking about, then you're just complaining. Yeah. So, but I guess that wraps it up. We've pretty much completed this. Now I got to go visit Alex, because, I guess he's got some good news for us. So we're going to go pick up the camera and walk over there to Alex's office. So I want to thank you very, very much for taking the time. I know you're a very busy person. So thank you so much for joining us and for giving us this information.
It's good to be with you again.
And to everybody, thanks again for watching. And let's go visit Alex, see what's the good news. Mr. City Manager, how are you?
I'm good.
Good to see you.
Let's talk.
Hello, everyone. Manuel Herrera again, Citizens for Better Oxnard. And if you recall, I was doing the interview with Ashley Golden, the Assistant City Manager, and she mentioned that the City Manager had a very important message for the people of Oxnard. So here we are with the City Manager, Mr. Alex Nguyen. So I guess we're going to just jump right into it, because I'm very, very curious to find out what this big announcement is. I thought maybe you guys were going to hire me or something, but because I am a volunteer, I do this for free. So, but if that's not the big announcement, then what is?
It's obviously related to the budget, and I'm happy to announce that this coming year, at the close of the year, which is June 30, we are expecting to have a large surplus, and it's the first time Oxnard's had a genuine budget surplus in a very long time. So, and I'll tell you, we expect it to be approximately $35 million. Wow.
A surplus? The city of Oxnard has a surplus?
Yes, we're very, due to a lot of circumstances, we're very fortunate to be in this position. And but it's a one-time event. This is not the norm nor the regular cycle that we should expect. I do view it as a one-time occurrence.
You said it's been a while, and God, I can't even remember how long it's been. Any idea how long?
In at least 20 years, if not longer, from my understanding.
Years. Wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that's definitely great news.
It's very good news. It's comforting news, but it's not permanent news, right? I want to be very clear. I view this as a one-time occurrence. But yes, I don't want to take away from the fact that it is good news, and we're fortunate to be in this position, because this budget year, I've seen in the headlines a lot of cities that are struggling just to have a balanced budget.
Yes, no, that's why I'm really pleasantly surprised to hear this. Yeah. Like, wow, I did not expect that. I'm sure you remember back on July the 10th of 2018, that was your very first city council meeting. I was there. I was there to welcome you, but I was also there to criticize the city council because at the time we were, $9 million in the hole? Mr. Nguyen, I'm sorry that I had to rain on your parade, so I apologize for that. But I'm a very passionate person when it comes to my city. I love this city. I was born, raised, and I will die in Oxnard. That's how much I love this place. So when I see that we're in a financial crisis and we all have to, do our part, but then I see that upper management is not doing their part, That's the part that upsets me. So all I'm asking is that we all share in this financial crisis. There's 13 positions that will not be filled because we have no money for that. I'm sure you've driven around Oxnard since you've been here, and you've hit quite a few potholes. That's because there's no money to fix the potholes. We recently got a bill for over $500,000 for a recall, which, by the way, we voted against and saved every one of you your jobs, and yet we have no money. And so I went there, I said my piece, and I do remember the city council basically saying that, hey, trust us, we know what we're doing, we're hiring the right guy here. And, because of the experience we've had with previous city managers where Oxnard hasn't been in the best conditions financially for years, I guess it turned out okay after all, right?
So far, yes. In terms of the progress that we've made, I'm surrounded by an incredible team of professionals. We have staff, many who've been here much longer than I've been here, and many who are new, but they're committed to the city's purpose, and they're committed to fulfilling the city council's priorities. So we're fortunate to have a really strong workforce. We have great leadership on the council. They've been very consistent, they've been very clear, and they've been, in my mind, very responsible with the budgets that we've struggled through. And we're just in a very different position now, and it's positive.
All right, well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here at Buenos Dias, Oxnard. Hope you enjoyed it, and hey, let's go celebrate.